cheers. Here's Siddle. Oh, the ball is close. He's given him. He's given him. Peter Siddle's got a hat-trick on his birthday.
Welcome back to the On The Ball podcast. This is episode 69 of the show. Today I'm joined by no one. I'm back here again with the solo podcast. So today we're going to be talking about a topic we haven't talked about too much on this podcast, but if I'm being honest, it's probably the sport I'm involved with most. I watch pretty much every game every weekend, and it's the rugby league, the NRL. So today I'm going to be doing a bit of a season review of the teams who missed out on finals. So the last round happened, I'm recording this on a Monday, so the season concluded yesterday, and final starts in a couple days. So I thought I'd get this out before final starts. So I'm going to be reviewing the seasons of the teams who just missed the cut, so 9th to 16th. And then after the final series, or maybe during the final series, I'll do some more NRL content and talk about the teams who actually did make it to the finals. But so today we're just going to roll through 9th to 16th, and we will be awarding some awards such as like each team, best player, most improved, rating out of 10, and we'll just talk about the takeaways from each club's season. So without further ado, I reckon we started off with 9th and we'll work our way back to 16th. 9th, we have the Gold Coast Titans, finished on 18 points, stormed home 5-0 in their last 5 matches. I think this was a resounding success of a season. They were only 2 points outside the 8 in the end. I don't think they had any huge scalps, but they beat a lot of the teams in and around them, and I think they did beat some decent sides. But yeah, really positive that they came home strongly. You'd obviously rather come home strongly than start strongly and then fade away, because it's better for your prospects for the next season. But yeah, 9th for the Titans. I think most people would have been tipping them 16th or 15th. I know when we did our NRL predictions very early on in this podcast history, we had the Warriors and Titans in second last and last, and I think pretty much everyone else did in the NRL community. So both clubs absolutely smashed it, I'd say. But focusing on the Titans first, in terms of the takeaways, I think they've found their halves pairing. I think that's the biggest takeaway of this season. We came into it not really knowing what their best halves pairing was. They've tried a lot of things. Obviously, Ash Taylor's probably been the main constant, but they've tried a lot of different people there. They've tried Taylor with Peachy. They've tried Taylor with Kane Elgee. They've tried Tyrone Roberts. They've honestly tried so many people. And Jamal Fogarty, he's taken over at halfback, and Ash Taylor's now the number 6, and it's working like an absolute treat. Jamal Fogarty actually won my most improved award in this. I don't know if he debuted this season or he played a bit last year. I can't quite remember, but I hadn't heard of him too much before this season. He really came onto the scene well. Great manager of the game. Just allows Ash Taylor to be at his best creatively, as he takes control of, steering the ship pretty much from tackle 1 to tackle 5 of each set. So they've found a great halves pairing there to move forward with. Ash Taylor's still young. Fogarty's not too young because he spent a lot of time in the Queensland Cup, but he's young in the NRL, so he should improve. But then fullback AJ Brimson, he came back halfway through the season. He really changed the team. That's kind of where their season switched. They had a solid season in the first half, but they were a little bit patchy at times, had some poor performances, and when Brimson came back, they really looked a different side. He was just breaking teams apart. And then at hooker, Mitch Rain, I think, did most of the hooking duties there. I know they shed it around a little bit. Aaron Clark did a bit. Nathan Peets did a bit. But I think Mitch Rain's their man there. So their spine seems to be fairly sorted. They've got some great signings coming in next year. They've got David Fifita, Tino Fasamalawi, who I think has been one of the most impressive young players of the season at Melbourne. So I'm surprised Melbourne let him go, to be honest, because they usually only let go the people who they think are kind of disposable. But yeah, I think the Titans are going to be really exciting next year. They do lose Jai Arrow to the Bunnies, but I think they'd kind of reached the stage where Jai Arrow was no longer like carrying that forward pack. They'd found a few others. Best player, I'm going to award it to 2 players, actually. Brian Kelly and Milwaukee Fodawaker. I think Brian Kelly really stood up this year. He's always been, I remember him when he started in Manly, and I thought he was a really impressive talent. I've kind of been waiting for this breakout in the last couple seasons, and he has underperformed, but this year he really took it to another level. I was only talking about it recently with my brother, and I was saying he's probably not too far off Origin selection with the form he's in. He scored some great individual tries, a little bit like Katoni Staggs in the way he plays. Powerful, strong, agile. He's just a weapon, really. And yeah, I was really impressed with Brian Kelly this season. And then Moaki Fodawaker, probably not the biggest shock coming into this year. He was a young gun with huge raps, had a good season last year, but mainly, coming off the bench and stuff like that. But this year he really announced himself as one of the best starting props in the competition. He's not a freak at this stage of his career yet, but he's so young. He's got a lot of potential. For a big man, he's got such good speed and footwork at the line, which is really impressive. A lot of line breaks he made, and yeah, he was really good. And as I said earlier, most improved, I had Jamal Fogarty, but there could probably be a number of blokes going for this award. Sam Lasoni, he's someone who I was really impressed with, especially in a few of the games that I saw the Titans play. Well, I saw all their games because I pretty much watched every game this year because I have no life. But yeah, Sam Lasoni, I thought Moaki Fodawaker gets all the headlines, but I thought Sam Lasoni was a great deputy to Fodawaker. He kind of got moved onto the bench with Jamin Joliffe getting the starting position, but I think that dynamic of those three props rotating around worked really well. Kevin Proctor was also pretty good in the back row. But yeah, all in all, a great season for the Titans. Justin Holbrook probably deserves Coach of the Year. Might do a awards show in the middle of the final series around when the Dally M medals are on. But yeah, for me, Holbrook would be right up there for Coach of the Year. What he's done with this team is insane, and the signings they've got to come are really exciting. So it's a great time to be a Titans fan. Next up, we've got the Warriors. It's basically can echo everything I said about the Titans. They were predicted to come so low. People, especially when the news was announced they're going to stay in Australia the whole year, people were expecting them to, maybe not even win a game. And they've come out and they've won 8 matches, only 2 wins outside the 8, and they've finished above teams like Manly, the Tigers, the Dragons, Cowboys, who you would have laughed if someone said the Warriors would finish above all those sides. So I think all in all, it was a really good year for the Warriors. Obviously, besides footy, huge thanks to the Warriors, and I think the NRL community is deservedly so praising them for what they've done as a club. They came over to Australia, the players and staff sacrificed so much. They probably accepted that it would maybe harm their on-field performance, but in the end it actually might have boosted it. But they sacrificed so much, a lot of them didn't see their families for 4 to 5 months, just so we could keep the great game of NRL rolling on. So I think every NRL club, every NRL fan is very grateful to the Warriors. And I think the first few times where, they were getting the speeches after the games and stuff, it was almost out of a bit of pity because they were losing. But now I feel like they're probably getting less thanks just because how well they did. Like, people feel a little bit less sorry for them. But like, the thanks shouldn't be any less just because how well they've done. They did have a coach change during the year, but that didn't seem to harm them at all. The best player for the Warriors, I've gone Peter Hiku and Tohu Harris. Tohu Harris, he's a quiet achiever. He just goes about his business, and then you look at the stat sheet and you saw he had, 140 metres, 35 tackles every game. It's just impressive what he does week in, week out. And Peter Hiku, I thought he was seriously underrated this year. I think the last couple games, the commentators might have started to get around him a little bit more, but I think he had something like 15 or more try involvements from the centre position. He would just set up so many tries, scored a hat-trick in one of the early rounds, but he was just a try-scoring machine, try-assisting machine. He's just such a talented finisher and assister. He's kind of like BJ Leilua in his prime back at Canberra. But yeah, Hiku was on fire this year. Very solid in all aspects of his game. So I don't think New Zealand are playing this year, but if New Zealand were to be playing, I thought he would been a lock in that centre position. 100% slotting in. But yeah, the Warriors had a lot of impressive players this year. Eliesa Katoa could have easily won Best Player. He missed a bit of time from injury, but he was so impressive. Most improved, I had Cody Nikorima. I can't lie, I'm pretty critical of Cody Nikorima. Last year, I thought that was a shocking signing from the Warriors to get him from the Broncos. And then even early on this year, I just thought he was rubbish. But he really stood up in this, well, not even the second half, from about round 4 onwards, he was great. I think even after, in the second half, I think when Blake Green went to Newcastle and unfortunately, had his injury, I think that freed him up a little bit, allowed him a little bit more creative control. I think him and Harris DeVita as the halves pairing for the future with Roger down back, I think that's a great little spine they've got there. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what the Warriors can do next year. Nathan Brown coming as coach, Phil Gould coming in as some director or something. And them themselves, similar to the Titans, have some great signings. I can't remember them all off the top of my head because they've made so many, but they've got Ewan Aitken, Fanua Blake, Kane Evans, all exciting signings. And I think they've got the core of what could be a great team in a few years. They just need to fit a few pieces around that, and that's what they seem to be doing. I think Fanua Blake's such a good signing. For me, Fanua Blake's one of the best, probably the best prop in the competition when he's on. So my only fear with him is sometimes some of the Kiwi players. I actually don't know if Fanua Blake's a Kiwi, to be honest. I think he might have played for Tonga, but a lot of the players from New Zealand and Tonga, when they get that move back home, a lot of the times their performance dips a bit. I'm thinking of Adam Blair. I'm not quite sure who else, to be honest, but I can't think of any other specific examples. But that seems to happen quite a bit. They're just happy to be playing NRL at home, and they maybe aren't as cutthroat in terms of their training and stuff. But the Warriors are looking so good for next year. Both the Titans and Warriors, just given their ladder position, how close they were to making finals, and their upward trajectory, they're both going to be pushing for finals next year. Obviously, it's hard because those top 8 teams are all so good, but it's hard to see how the Titans and Warriors aren't going to notch up more wins than they did this season with the amount of signings, youngsters, everything they've got in their teams. Great coaches. Nathan Brown, kind of jury's still out on him, but we'll see how he goes there. Cracking season from the Warriors once again. Thank you for everything they've done for the competition. We respect it so highly. Next up, we've got my beloved West Tigers. Oh, I haven't been giving ratings, sorry. Titans and Warriors, look, I'm not going to kid around here. It's probably close to a 10 for both. I'm going to do it. I'll give them both a 10 out of 10. I think if you told the Titans they would come 9th, 2 points out of 8, 2 points off 8th, I think they would have laughed in your face. And for the Warriors, for what they did after it had been announced they were staying in Australia the whole season, I think if anyone told them they were going to come 10th, they would have laughed. Great achievement from both teams. So I'll give them both 10 out of 10. It's probably a bit generous, but honestly, I think 2 of the best seasons out of all 16 teams. So the West Tigers, look, I can't lie, it's a bit of a disappointing season. I didn't buy into the hype because I just saw the other teams, how they were improving. I thought Panthers and the Knights were going to jump up. Well, I actually don't think I predicted the Panthers to jump up, but I thought the Knights would improve. I thought, teams around the Tigers last year would move up, and that would just relatively push the Tigers down. Not that that'd be worse, but a lot of people were predicting the Tigers to make the 8, which I thought was a little bit ambitious, but maybe that's just me being pessimistic as a supporter of a pretty average club. I can't lie, 11th is probably pretty disappointing. Tied 13th, which is more of a concern. Also, just the back half of the season form. I think we started the year pretty decently. We were, lurking around 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th for most of the season. And then, the last 5 rounds, the wheels kind of fell off. We had a really rough draw on the run home, it has to be said, but we just didn't look too competitive in too many of those games. Highlights of the season, probably the 2 Parramatta games and the 2 Penrith games. Thought we were really competitive in all 4. A shame we couldn't win any of them because I think we deserved points from some of them at least. We were probably, obviously the Panthers didn't win every single game, but we were probably one of the teams that challenged them the most. So we showed glimpses that we have it, but ultimately 11th isn't great. Tied 13th, not good at all. And yeah, in terms of rating, look, if five's average, I'm gonna give them a 4, just because I think maybe ninth would have been where they would expected to come. So anything above that would have been better than average. Below that is below average. So yeah, I'll give them a 4. Might be a bit harsh, but yeah, I just don't think. I think there's worrying signs of the Tigers still. I don't think there's a clear path to success just yet. I've got faith in Madge as a supporter, but I know a lot of people don't. It's going to be interesting to see now what he does with the club. A lot of cap space has been freed up. I think there's over 8 players leaving the club this year, either off contract or moving elsewhere. So it's going to be really interesting to see what we do. We've been linked with every man and their dog. So it's going to be interesting. A lot of calls for Dewey to move to 5'8". I agree with it. And my older brother actually thinks Nofaluma should play fullback. Personally, I disagree with that. I think he showed that he's one of the best wingers in the competition, and I'm not sure he has the ball playing to go fullback. I'd rather us keep him winger and sign a fullback. We're linked with Tristan Saylor, which that'd be a big risk, but I like that. It's bold, and if it pays off, I think we could be a young, exciting side. I hope we stick with Brooksy at the 7 for another year. I think, no offense to Benji, I love him so much, and Chris Lawrence. Just on a side note, congrats to them on awesome careers. I'm only a young guy, so I pretty much don't know what the West Tigers are without Chris Lawrence and Benji Marshall. So I'd really like to thank both of them. I've shed too many tears over the last 72 hours for both of them, but love them to bits, and I hope they can see some success for the club in the future and know that they were a part of setting up that foundation. But yeah, as Benji departs, I think Brooksy will get a little bit more creative freedom. I think we've seen in the last month, although our form as a team's not been great, I think Brooksy's really improved. I still think there's room to improve in his kicking game. I think sometimes his execution could be quite poor, but I think his passing game is pretty good. But it's probably last year's probably his last chance, to be honest, to lead a side. If he doesn't perform next year, I think we might have to move him on. But I think Tigers fans, I'll be honest, I think we've got to lower our hopes a little bit next year. If you look who's finished above us, the Titans and Warriors, they're only going to get better. The Dragons, Manly, they're probably unknown quantities. So all I'm saying is I think it wouldn't shock me if we finish below 10th again next year. Just the way the other teams are projecting upwards, and we're not really, we don't have that clear path to success just yet. But there's been some exciting players. My best player is going to David Nofaluma. I was talking to my family about it before. My brother reckons it should be Harry Grant, and my dad reckons it should be Luciano Leilua. All good shouts. For me, Grant just didn't play enough. I think he missed like 5 weeks due to injury, and when he came back from that injury, it wasn't quite the same. But first half of the competition, he was one of the best players in the league, so I can vouch for that. But I thought Nofaluma was so strong every week. He kind of tailed away in the last couple weeks in terms of his meterage, not necessarily his try scoring, but he just saved us out of the back so much. He was really good in about 2017, but the last couple seasons I thought he had waned a little bit in talent, and I was maybe quite sceptical of him because he's not the greatest defender, but now he's just charging on those first and second tackles and making us big meters every time. So I think he's been our best player, and I don't think he will get picked for New South Wales because they, like to pick fullbacks and stuff out of position and play wing. But I honestly think he's been the best New South Wales Welsh winger this season. I think Addo-Carr, yes, he's come home strongly, but I think over the course of the 20 rounds, Nofaluma has been better than all Addo-Carr, Mansour, and Ferguson. But I don't think he will be picked, and I don't necessarily think he should. But I just think he's the best winger in New South Wales. Most improved, there's so many to choose from. I guess there's a lot of guys who probably didn't have much opportunity before this year, so I don't know if you can call them improved, but Adam Dewey, Luciano Leilua, and Harry Grant, they all fit that category. We haven't seen too much of any of them, but I'll say Luciano Leilua. We saw probably more of him than Dewey and Grant in previous seasons, and he looked skillful, but he always looked a bit unfit. He reminded me a bit of a T-Rex, Tony Williams. A little bit unfit, super skillful though. But he really cut down his weight, play 80 minutes every week, and he was always just one of our... He's probably a guy who is probably never in our top 2 in any game, but he was always like 3rd or 4th, just consistent week in, week out. And then, Dewey and Grant, they were both awesome. In terms, I've already given a rating 4. Alright, so next up I've got the Dragons. Best player, I've gone with Zach Lomax. And most improved, I've gone with Matthew Dufty. You could probably swap them around, but I think we've seen more of Dufty in previous years, so I think he's more applicable to the most improved. But they were by far and away the Dragons' brightest lights this season. I can't lie, the Dragons, they didn't finish well. They only had 1 win in their last 4, but something about yesterday's game, there's a bit of a positive sign the way the Dragons finished here. They bled a lot of youngsters. They've got a new coach coming in. I don't know, it feels a little bit more positive than, for, say, the Tigers or even the Seagulls. There seems like there's a little bit of hope. They've found Clune. Looks like a really good halfback. Nothing outstanding, but he looks like he's going to be a really solid club player for, 5 or 10 years. I know he's a bit older. And then Jaden Sullivan, hopefully he starts next season because... he didn't do too much yesterday, but just the wraps on him, and he looks like an exciting prospect. So if they could get those 2 in the halves, Dufty at fullback, Lomax at centre, all of a sudden they've got Ben Hunt at hooker, all of a sudden they've got a pretty good core there of good players, and then they've just got to build a team around them. They've still got a pretty good forward pack on paper. They are losing Tyson Frizzell to the Knights, and they lost James Gray mid-season, but you've still got, Josh Kerr, Paul Vaughan, and Cam McInnes, so... There's hope there for the Dragons. There's a future, a lot of young, good players. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom, although they probably were hoping to finish above 12th this year. But I think 12th is probably exactly where I predicted them to come. Ultimately, I don't know. They probably didn't live up to the general population's expectations. But I think the teams that finished above them are better than them. Actually, I don't know. The Titans Warriors, they weren't predicted to finish high, so I'll probably, if 5's average, I'll probably just go a 4, similar to the Tigers. They probably just underperformed what the general expectation of them was. But I don't think, if you're going to be realistic with that Dragons team, I don't think you could have been asking too much more with Norman and Hunt being your halves pairings going into the season. Lomax, Dufty, really bright signs there. Next up, we've got Manly. I'll be honest, I'm pretty embarrassed about this one. I actually predicted them to win the premiership. I didn't think they were going to finish high on the ladder, but I thought they're a dangerous team that could beat anyone on their day. I know late last year they beat Melbourne, down in Melbourne. They beat some other good sides that they probably weren't expected to. So I think I had them finishing about 6th and then just pushing on and going on a bit of a dream run. It has to be said, the Turbo injury affected their season hugely, but no team in the NRL should be so reliant on one player, and I think Manly have realised that that's the case this year. They looked decent. They didn't look great with him, I have to admit, but they looked decent with him in the side. They looked bound for top 8, and then ever since his injury, they just looked really out of form. I have to say, they're still top quality players. I'm sure we'll see them in Origin at the end of the year, but I think Jake Trbojevic and DCE, I think they probably had off years this year, if I'm honest. If we look at their form in the last 5 years, this is probably the worst season they've had. I just think Jake Turbo, his style of play, he's obviously a great defender and stuff like that, but in terms of attack, he's not going to, eat 150 metres. He's a ball player. I think that suits a really successful team. So when the team was down in the dumps and kind of needed someone to pick up the pieces and ram through the middle, he's probably not your guy you want at lock, but he's obviously a quality defender and stuff like that. So I'm not saying he should be dropped or leave or anything, but I just think for your 2 best players, I think the Seagulls would have been hoping DC and Jake Trbojevic would have carried them a little bit better. But ultimately, a team shouldn't rely so heavily on 2 or 3 players like they have, and I think they got found out. Ultimately, I know there's people saying Hasler should be brought under fire, but I think they've definitely got to give him one more year. Manasi Fainu didn't play this year for obvious reasons. Tom Trbojevic was injured. Dylan Walker was injured. So that's 3 out of 4 of your starting spine. So if you do that to any club, they're probably going to struggle. So I think you've got to give him another chance. I don't think he deserves to come under fire just yet. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the off-season signings. They're losing Fanua Blake, which is huge. As I said earlier in the podcast, I think Fanua Blake's the best prop in the competition, and him and Marty Tapau really made a great prop strike force. But yeah, so for me, Fanua Blake was the best player. He missed a few games, and you could really see that when he was gone, how much they missed him. And even when he would go onto the bench, they just looked like a completely different team. But when he would come back out there, standard 15-metre runs with an offload to top it off. It's just insane stuff from Fanua Blake. I do think Marty Tapau, although they're a great strike force, I think Tapau's been a bit down the last couple seasons. So we'll see how he goes next year as, the big name prop. Most improved, I've got Moses Sully and Taniela Paseka. Could be a bit of Tigers bias here, both of them former Tigers. But yeah, for me, Moses Sully, especially in the first half of the competition, he didn't play in the last 5 or 6 games because of injury. But in the first half, I thought he was having a bit of a breakout season. He's so big, he's fast, he's strong. Everything you want in a centre, basically. He was looking like a bit of a prime Conrad Hurrell at one point. Or even Solomon Kato, if you will. But yeah, he looked really dangerous, just so hard to stop. Because, there's not many other centres that are so big. So, when he gets the fend out, he's almost unstoppable. So he was another guy they missed a lot when he got injured. But for me, he was really improved because he always showed glimpses at his past clubs, but he's obviously had off-field issues. Never really quite put together game after game. But this year, he looked like he was breaking out. So watch him next year. And then Taniela Paseka. I know Blocker shares his sentiment a lot on Fox Leave coverage of the game, but he always kind of questions, he's so big, why isn't he more damaging? And I think everyone else says that. He's so tall, I think he's 6'5", 6'6", maybe even taller. But I think he kind of realised how big he was in the second half of this season. He really came out of his shell. A lot of offloads, a lot of line breaks. I remember a try, I don't know if he set it up or he scored it, but it was like a 70-metre break or something. So yeah, he's my most improved Moses Sully. In terms of a rating for the Manly Seagulls, though, look, I'm going to have to be pretty harsh. They were expected to come top 8, maybe even top 4. I'm going to give them a 2 out of 10. I just don't think any other team in the league underperformed their expectations. Yes, the Broncos have got all the headlines because they came last, but I honestly think Manly are quite lucky that the Broncos had a shocker of the season because what did they come last year? 5th or something. All signs were projecting them to improve this year, and then they've come 13th. So yeah, pretty poor season for the Seagulls, but I'm not sold that they're completely horrible yet. I think they're going to make the top 8 again next year. Obviously, it's going to be hard though because you got your top 8, you got the Titans and Warriors looking to improve. So yeah, I think a lot of it's going to come down to what they do in the off-season. I think they've been rumoured to get Kieran Foran, but so is a lot of the teams. Would be quite cool to see him back with DC, but would mean Dylan Walker would have to move on. I know they've told Danny Levi he's not wanted next year. Finu's signed on for 2 years, so I think Finu will have a huge season next year. I think everyone needs to watch out for him. Next up, we've got the North Queensland Cowboys. Quite another embarrassing season, I'd say. Seagulls, Cowboys, and Broncos are the standouts for the worst seasons. They had a bad year last year. They came 12th or something. I thought they were bouncing back this year. I think I actually predicted them to come in the top 8. I just thought with the team they had on paper, it was too good not to. But defensively, they were just so poor. Week after week, they would just ship 20-plus points. They would actually score quite a few points. But they were just so bad in defence. They conceded 520. Only team to have a worse defence was the Brisbane Broncos. But yeah, they just let themselves down. I know against the Tigers when they conceded about 32 and 1/2, Scotty Drinkwater looked like he'd butted up before the game. He honestly couldn't stop a single player. So yeah, it was just really a shocker of a season for them. unlike some of the teams in this list, they probably don't have a great path to success like the Tigers, which is a bit of a worry for the fans. They've got a few players in their prime, a few players in the back end of their career, a few young players, so there's not really a clear direction for the club. But, they've got Todd Payton coming in. We'll see what they do in the off-season. You think they'll make some moves, but they do have a lot of cap space tied up with, Tamalolo and Holmes over, I think, combined they're on over 2 mil. But I think Holmes looked really good at the start of the season. I think that ankle injury never really healed, so we'll see how he goes next year. Best player I've given to Jason Tamalolo. I'll be honest, I just copped out there. It's pretty easy to give Tamalolo awards just because he does pretty solid every single week. But his form, I think we kind of forgotten, but his form in that first 6 weeks were incredible. He was averaging over 180 metres a game. And honestly, there was just no one else really to give it to. Most improved, I've given it to Frankie Molo, Jake Clifford, and Hamiso Tabuo Fido. Hammer, obviously, is his debut season, so he can't really win most improved, but I thought he deserved a shout out. Obviously, he's similar to, kind of like Addo-Carr, he's just known for being fast, but he's actually a really good footy player. I know that try he scored at fullback in about round 13 or 14 was such a good try. The Cowboys looked down and out, and he just had a bit of a solo effort, broke 8 tackles. So he looks like a really interesting prospect for the future. I think he should sit on the wing for a few seasons, and then maybe he can move into fullback. But for me, he looked a little bit raw at fullback. But I think he needs to just mature, get larger on the wing, and then maybe move into fullback. But who knows? I know Ponga, he just thrives straight away at fullback. Frankie Molo, I think the weeks that Tamalolo was gone especially, he stood up. So he's quite similar to Tamalolo, actually. He's not as talented, obviously, but he's big, he's fast, he's strong, got good footwork. So I think he was a bit of a shining light in the season. And then Jake Clifford. I'll be honest, last year we saw a bit of him, but I thought he was no good. Usually you can kind of tell when they debut if they have that thing, but I thought he looked pretty bad last year. But this year, they looked out of sorts until he came into the team, and then, they didn't have a great win rate when he came into the side, but they looked a little bit better. They looked like they had a little bit more direction. So I think him and Drinkwater will be the starting halves pair of next year, and we'll see how that goes. But 2 young players, so they could improve, or it could prove to be a bit of a shambles like it did this season. So for the Cowboys, or if I gave the Seagulls a 2, I've probably got to give them a better score than that, but I don't think they deserve a 4, because that's what I gave the Tigers and Dragons. So I'll give them a 3 out of 10. That moves me on to the Bulldogs in 15th. I'll be honest, probably about where everyone predicted them to come. I think people were predicting 14th, but that was probably when no one expected the Titans and Warriors to break out. I'll be honest, not much to really say about the Bulldogs. A little bit of an underwhelming year, I thought, after what we saw at the back end of last season. I thought they were going to kick on with that, and maybe no one thought they were going to make finals or anything like that, but maybe show signs of improvement, and that really didn't fabricate this year. Foreign injury troubles again. Their salary cap's just absolutely messed up. You look at their list compared to some of the other lists in the competition, you just wonder how the caps match up. Luke Thompson came in from England. I actually don't know. He must be getting suspended soon for that eye rate, because that was pretty bloody bad. But I was saying to my brothers and my dad when I was watching the game on the weekend, I think he's been a bit of an unsung hero. I think if he was at a better club where their games had a bit more eyes on them, I think he would have been talked about a lot more. I think he was pretty good, especially he took a few games to ease into it, but he hadn't played NRL at all this year. Well, rugby league, I think he played 1 match for St. Helens or something. So I think he was a pretty good signing. Best player, I'm giving it to Raymond Fatala Mariner. He could probably win both awards, to be honest, but he was their standout player. No one in their spine really stood out. Hopewadi had a few good games down back. Meaney had a couple good games. Foran had a few good games. Lewis was pretty bad. They just haven't found that halves pairing. Cog has been tried. Wakeham has been tried. Lewis has been tried. And I have to be honest, I don't think any of those 3 have got what it takes. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Bulldogs go from here. Look, I'll be honest, no offense to Bulldogs fans, I just don't think there's too much good signs at that club for the near future. I think it's going to need a serious rebuild because at the moment, the list is by far the worst in the comp. Most improved, I've given it to Jake Averillo and Nick Meaney. Similarly to some of the other guys I mentioned, I don't think Averillo played before this year, but when he played, I was like, wow, where's this kid been? I think he actually got dropped a few times, but I thought he was one of the standouts in most of the games I watched. Just really dangerous at centre, and then in the back half of the year, he kind of showed that he had a little bit of the halves play in him as well. I also thought Nick Meaney was pretty good. Look, I'll be honest, it frustrates me that they won't just give him the fullback gig because, yes, Hopewade is a good player, but, he's kind of nearing the end of his career. The Bulldogs, they're not in top 8 contention anytime soon, so they may as well look to the future and give Nick Meaney a crack rather than letting him rot on the wing. So hopefully that's something they do next year. Out of 10, look, if people were predicting them come 14th, I'll give them a 4. I just think maybe a little few wins for their liking. They only won 3 games and they only missed the wooden spoon because of the Broncos. So I don't think it was too good. But new coach next year, hopefully some good off-season business for them. We'll see how they go. And then finally, we've got the Brisbane Broncos. Obviously, everyone knows they came last. It's been pretty well documented all season how bad they've been. I'll just come straight out of it. Rating, I'm actually not going to be too harsh on the rating. Just because if you think Manly, they were predicted to come like top 4. They've come 13th. I've given them a 2. Probably deserves to be a 1. I'm going to give the Broncos... it's probably not a 3, but it's probably not a 2. I'll give them a 2. I don't think they deserve a better rating than Manly. But yeah, they were just awful. I don't know what happened to the Broncos this year. After round 2, I thought they were not premiership contenders, but I thought they were pretty much locks for finals, to be honest. They played so well those first 2 games. And then after lockdown, I don't know what happened. Obviously, they had a bit of coaching drama. Seibold's now gone. Now there's all these rumours about Bellamy, Paul Green, Kevin Walters. So who knows what's happening there. It looks like Walters is going to be the head coach. Bellamy is going to come in as a director of coaching, but none of that's been confirmed yet. Unlike what Buzz Rothfield will try and tell you. Best player, I'll give it to Katoni Staggs. He was injured and suspended a couple times. Payne Haas probably a bit stiff, but Katoni Staggs, for me, he was just so impressive this year. He could probably win most improved as well. But if it wasn't for his injury in, I think, the second last round, I think he would have been in right contention with Brian Kelly and a few others for New South Wales outside back selection. He was just so good. His ability to break tackles, provide a bit of spark when there is none. Like there's nothing going on. He would just create a line break out of nothing. He is a superstar. Most improved, I'll give it to Herbie Farnworth. I'm a big fan of Herbie Farnworth, actually. I don't know, when he used to come off the bench early in the season, I thought this guy had a bit. And I think he did play before this year, so once again, not really improved. But I think he's someone they should stick with in the future. He played, I think he started the whole second half of the year, but I think there was a bit of an attitude issue at the Broncos for most of the season, but he was one guy who never really looked like he was suffering from that. He was always giving it a red hot crack. He might not be the most skilled footy player, but he's a bright prospect, I reckon, and could be a good clubman for a long time. But yeah, look, I don't want to dwell too much on the Broncos. It's in the past now. They've just had an absolute shocker of a year. The only issue is with the Broncos, as I keep saying this, there's not really a clear path to success. If you just look at their spine, they had Darius Boyd played the second half of the year at fullback, and he's retiring. So that's already one of your key positions you need to fill. It's going to be interesting to see what they do next year. If they just go full young and just cop having a bad year, or if they go recruit in free agency. Not free agency, it's not AFL and NBA, but go pick up some players and try and quickly rebuild, or try and win on the rebuild almost. Or they just completely bottom out, give Tessie new starts at fullback, just roll with Did and I don't even know who would be 5'8", to be honest, but yeah, I just don't know where to go here, where to go from here for the Broncos. They've let David Fifita go, who's probably their brightest prospect in a long time. But yeah, I don't want to dwell on it too much because it's been documented everywhere you look in NRL media circles, but just an absolute stinker of a year from the Broncos. And look, I wish them good luck next year. I can't lie, I haven't really felt sad for them because they've been such a strong club for so long, but you know, I think it's important for NRL that the Broncos are good because they dominate the Brisbane market and the Queensland market, bring a lot of viewers. But yeah, absolute stinker of a year, and hopefully there's brighter times at the Broncos. But thanks for joining me today. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there'll be an awards episode, I think, in a few weeks from now. And then we'll review the teams who made the finals after finals because I don't really want to review it before finals. But yeah, enjoy the finals. There's going to be a lot more stuff coming out of the On the Ball podcast, so stay tuned to the Instagram page, the Twitter page, the Facebook page, like and subscribe on YouTube, get around it on the listening platforms. And yeah, until now, stay safe and thanks for listening. See ya.